1 o'clock. That's the time that was noticed and posted for our work session. It's Thursday, April 18th, 2024. We're in the Board of Supervisors hearing room, Melody Lane, Bisbee. Pursuant to ARS 38-431.028, the public will have physical access to the meeting place 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion, and we begin with the roll call. District 1?
Crosby is here.
District 2, Supervisor English is present. District 3?
Supervisor Judd is here.
We have a complete board. Members of the public may also attend this meeting by Microsoft Teams computer or mobile app or by phone by calling 602-609-7513 or 888-680-6714. Conference ID 284-382-260 #. If you have trouble accessing this meeting remotely, call 520-432-9200 for directions. Work sessions are a time for the county staff to inform and discuss items with the Board of Supervisors. Public comment will not be taken. In work sessions, introductions are always as you begin or before you start to give your information. Give us your name and who you represent, so we'll have a complete record in case people want to check and find out. So today we have the county budget for the coming year, 24-25, for the county assessor's office. Did you have any comments, Mr. Karwachka, before I turn it over to Phil?
I do not.
Okay, then Phil, the floor is yours.
Very good. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, board members.
Good afternoon.
Welcome from your county assessor's office. The budget itself is pretty straightforward. I want to touch on that just a minute, and then I'll go through, kind of give you an update on the status of the assessor's office, where we're at and where we're going. We had a couple slight increases in the budget. Item 422.500 postage. We're right now over postage, and we're asking for an increase in postage there simply because it's a have to. That's mandatory statutory mailings, evaluation notices, and the necessary things we have to do. The other issue is on 428.000 operating lease rental. That actually is for our systems operation, our Harris program. And they took a significant increase this year, almost 9%. All the counties got hit with the same percentage of increase. It's one of those things that we will have further discussions with them, but I've got a budget for what they said for the cost, so that's an increase.
And you don't have any other choice.
No, we have no other options. This is mandatory operation. The additional budget showing a 5% reduction that was asked for, my first go around, I was looking at 5% of my entire budget. So I was just saying I'm going to have to cut positions. But then discussion with Juan is just in the operations side of it. So then I was able to make 5% recommendations. If we get to that point, you do what you have to do to cut.
Right.
You always have a little bit here or there that you can scratch out, and it is what it is at that point. But ultimately, our budget majority of our budget is, like probably most county operations, payroll. So about the other balance of the budget, there's less than 1% in there that's actually discretionary on our part. It's pretty much all statutory function. So
Let me ask you a question. When Kathy came into us, she put under elected officials' wages $80-some thousand for next year. I noticed you've kept it the same at $63,800.
Let me see if I could answer that one.
What's on the budget worksheet 1 of 2?
What section are you looking at? 401-800 or?
Well, it's 401.
100. First one.
Oh, 401-100. Oh, yeah. We do have 2 increases in elected official salary.
Well,
and here's where I came
this
from.
one wasn't that.
I didn't make any adjustments there simply because I thought that was pretty much handled on your side of the fence.
Yeah.
And we carried it straight across, assuming that's going to be handled at a known entity, a known fact. But we didn't do anything with the budgets except carry that straight across.
Okay.
If that was wrong.
Well, then it
no
needs to
comment.
be fixed,
Correct, I'll correct.
because that will change the bottom line and
Yes,
the
it
amount
will.
that you
Yes, it
need.
will.
And those statutory changes do fall on the county side, the budget side,
Okay.
to make those automatic changes.
Yeah.
At least the first year, it's only half of the year. Doesn't it start in January?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So it won't be quite as big of an increase this
Yeah.
year for anybody.
But I just noticed that and I thought, well, something's wrong.
I should have known that too, huh?
Yeah, you should have noticed it as much as anybody.
Been locked in for 16 years, why change now?
I mean, I won't be here, but I noticed that, you know.
Yeah.
Whoa.
We're happy for everybody else, but.
Okay, so if there's any questions regarding that part of it, I'll go on to the my little PowerPoint here. Is this the clicker here?
yes.
So my first page is the standard page that I always submit for the simple reason of emphasizing the fact that most of the functions in the assessor's office is specifically dictated by statutory requirements. And, you know, whenever we get into issues, either with property owners, taxpayers, whatever, valuation appeals, whatever, you know, a lot of it comes down to why are you doing this? And they don't like my policy, and et cetera. And we have to go back to the reality. It's not my policy. This is state law. We're following statute. And once you get to that point, you are educating the public to the reality of what we have to do. So that's the backbone of what we do. There's very little discretionary calls. And the exception to that is when you get into the appraisal end of it with certified appraisal staff. An appraisal is an opinion of value, an estimate of value that we have to do using standard appraisal procedures. So then again, that's where the discretion comes in, but that discretion is based upon standard appraisal procedures. So most of the issues that we get into with a property owner, evaluation appeal, or a tax court case comes down to those procedures and the application of good judgment. So that's where our work comes in. Currently, we have 36 full-time positions with the assessor's office, including my position and the chief deputy. Right now, we have 6 vacant positions. We are in the process of doing more interviews. We've hired some really top quality staff, in our opinion. When you hire appraisal staff, there's at least anywhere from a 12 to 24 month period to get them certified and really get them productive. So there's that turnover period is a build-up period where you have to really do some training and get certification under belt and get that going. So that's where we're at. We've got 4 new appraiser positions.
Oh, you do, okay. There.
4 new appraiser positions there. So we are in the process of getting a couple more positions hired, and hopefully that'll put us in a better position down the
Could
road.
I ask you, normally you've got 11, it says here 11 appraiser ones. The people who are 2s and 3s, are they normally promoted from within, or can you actually advertise for an appraiser 3 and get one?
You
Or
know,
appraiser 2?
we've never hired, we've hired a couple of appraiser 2s from other counties or from other states. They, for the most part, I can only think of 1 or 2 right off the top of my head. They were not very successful, being they left a county because of they wanted to leave that county for whatever reason. And sometimes you're not getting the cream of the crop when they come to our county for a job, you know, unless they have a real reason to come here.
So basically, you're going to be promoting appraiser 1, so you'll have 2 vacancies
Typically, that's what happens.
and appraiser 1.
Typically, that's what happens. We try to promote from within to give upward mobility to staff, which is an incentive to stay on and to apply themselves. So that's a plus factor in our opinion. We only have 1 appraiser 3 position. So that's the senior appraiser. And then we have, as it says, 5 appraiser 2s, and majority of the appraiser 1s are in the field doing basic residential work. And the appraiser twos typically get more involved in specialty properties, commercial properties, and in some cases they'll cover, like the appraiser we have covering the northern part of the county is an appraiser two. He covers some ag, commercial, residential, a whole spectrum of different properties. Okay, the next slide basically gives you a report of our status for our full cash value. This is a 5-year outlook. The full cash value is what we're required to establish valuing at fair market value. So that's the primary value that we're charged with establishing. The full cash value, the 2024 full cash value was $12,785,478,238. That was a 15, almost a 16% increase from the prior year. You can see percentage-wise increases from 2020 to 2021 was like a 2.5% increase, 22 4.5% increase. Then we got up to 23. We made some big changes. There's a 15% increase and another big increase for 2024. So those increases are involving both the addition of new construction to the assessment roll, as well as increasing values due to the reality of the marketplace. So we track that market condition, and we have to monitor that and adjust values accordingly. So that's a big part of what we do as far as valuing property at fair market values. We have to track the real estate market and make those adjustments to stay current with current market values. That's a big number, but in reality, a lot of that number represents increases in some properties. We've had, increase in real estate. The market itself has impacted that too greatly.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
All those people that get veterans or whatever all of these things are,
Exemptions.
exemptions, how much does that take away from that?
It doesn't take away a lot. Really doesn't. I don't have a number here to show that, but it's not a big percentage, and part of that reason is because the qualifying limits for those exemptions is the full cash value can be just at a certain level, and a big percentage of people, either their income limit or their assessed value limit is not low enough to qualify.
Okay.
But we have quite a few exemptions. We have quite a few people, widows, widowers, people with 100% disability, and now the veterans that are getting exemptions.
Right.
So
Well, I knew when they added the veterans, was it last year before?
yeah.
Wasn't that long ago. I wondered, because we have a lot of veterans.
Yes, and a lot of that was promoted, in my opinion, were antics for stage purposes, to look good, like
Right.
we're trying to do something. I know the Assessors Association was pushing it, and the issue is most of the veterans won't qualify, but they weren't presenting it to them that way,
Right.
And then once it passes, then you have a whole bunch of veterans unhappy because they really don't qualify for what they were sold would be an exemption for them.
Okay, well,
Because
I heard the selling, and it sounded to me like they were making a big tent.
yeah. And in reality, they have to qualify for the same income limitations as the widows, widowers, and everybody else. And that wasn't shared publicly. So it was,
Big percentage of our veterans, they're still making good money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
so that's kind of that issue. So
thank you.
if we go to a breakdown of that full cash value, did I skip one? Let's go to the limited value. The limited value is what the actual tax roll is based on. And that's a calculation based upon a statutory calculation based upon each property's full cash value. So for 2024, our limited property value increased by about 5.5%. So it increased by $527 million. And that is real typical. 5% is the maximum a property can increase, limited value can increase, unless something specifically happens to a property that qualifies as a change to the footprint of the building, a change in use, something like that would qualify for it to be what we call a Rule B that would exempt it from a limit to the 5%. But in majority of the properties, the 5% is going to be the maximum increase in that limited value from the prior year. As you can see, that has increased, and that pretty much is what restricts the county's budget growth, obviously. The next page gives a little bit of a breakout on the full cash value. I thought this might be helpful to give you a little bit of a feel. For locally assessed property, all of the land represents about 22.5% of the full cash value in the county. The improvements, buildings and structures that are locally assessed represents about 68%. Locally assessed personal property, about a little over 2%. And centrally valued property, all the mines, utilities, power transmission lines, water utility companies, railroads, telecommunication towers and telecommunication lines, electric generating plants, all of that assessment represents slightly under 7% of our valuation. It's a little bit of a concern to me with what's going on with the Department of Revenue right now, because the Department of Revenue is responsible for all of that centrally valued valuation system statewide. The two top appraisers with the Department of Revenue have left the Department of Revenue for the last 4 or 5 months. There's very little monitoring of that. Now, the Department of Revenue monitors the counties on our locally assessed values, but it's like, who monitors the Department of Revenue on what they're doing with centrally valued, which is a really big piece of the pie.
Aren't they kind of self-reporting?
They are. They are self-reporting.
I'd like to tell you what my property is worth.
Yeah. And I'm not sure where this is going to go, but the status of the Department of Revenue in the performance of their statutory duties is shrinking. And the reality is that I'm not sure who's heading the ship. I mean, these are big properties, and if they're self-reported and they're being handled by the Department of Revenue, and most of the Department of Revenue is now working at home, I'm told, and the two top senior appraisers have left, so I'm not sure what the status of that is. And so I think, we're going to do some digging and some asking some questions and start pursuing this from our side of the fence to see what we're looking at here, because I think this is like, pay attention to what's going on here. They're looking at our side of the fence as far as equalization orders and everything, but I'm not sure who's looking at that side of the fence.
And they don't want to look much because the legislature wants to be so proactive in business, and and so they're always trying to do things that help them, and that's been problematic. Remember when we looked at the solar? I mean, not solar. It was the wind up by Wilcox.
Yeah.
What a fight we had with them, but what did we get out of it? Just a lot of talk.
What I see is the fact that the state gets nothing out of property tax.
So they don't care.
They really don't have a dog in the fight. And that's not really a true statement. The dog they have in the fight, if they do whatever they do, if it generates court appeals, they have to spend money in court defending what they do. So it's not in their best interest, money-wise, to push valuation levels to end up in court, because then they're going to have to spend extra money to defend those cases. So it's to me a blueprint for a collision with doing what needs to be done versus what they're going to do, because there's not a lot of motivation up there to do a good job. And quite honestly, doing a good job means you're going to have some battles.
Tom Jeff.
Yes, Crosby, District 1. What does the Corporation Commission have to do with that issue?
Really nothing.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay. That's all I need to know. No.
To my knowledge, the Arizona Department of Revenue is responsible for that function. And that's under the governor's direction.
Okay.
Whether or not they can build sometimes goes through the Corporation Commission, and they like to mess around with that, but the
Probably
value of it, you
Yeah.
know,
setting fees and things like that would go through the Corporation Commission from the individual utilities. But the actual valuation, property taxation process is through the Department of.
Okay.
So we can move on. So this is our report card, annual report card from the Department of Revenue from their equalization and valuation function. And this is what we call our black box report, that has, the report is broken out into basically three sections. Countywide, the first section is all vacant land, and we have nine market areas within the county. And the median ratio that's in red is the median sales ratio of properties of vacant land in those market areas. 82% is the desired target, meaning that the full cash values are roughly 82% of the selling prices. So as you look down the column on vacant land, you can see we're 80, 83, 87, 81, 80, 79, 80, 86, 74, 79. We're all well within acceptable limits of where we want to be. The next column, county-wide, are the residential ratios for the 9 market areas. And again, those are all within acceptable levels, ratios. Some of them are a little high, like Sulphur Springs Valley, there's only 14 sales. Louis Sansamon, there's only 11 sales used. That's not really a reasonable sales sampling, but you still have a ratio there to show you what our ratios are. Everything looks like they're in acceptable levels. And then third column on the bottom is for commercial property. County-wide, we're looking at 81% median county-wide on commercial properties. And again, these sales ratios are indicators. They only reflect the values of where the sales are occurring. So our constant battle is there are parts of the county where there may be very few or no sales. We have to monitor those areas as well as areas that show up on our sales report, because obviously whether or not there's a sale there, we need to make sure our values are good and consistent. So that's a continuous effort on our part. So these reports sometimes are misleading because it's an indicator, no more, no less. So you have to look deeper sometimes than the report itself. The next report I threw in is basically a countywide report on commercial property. And although we showed an 81% on commercial, you can see this breaks out. This is a report that the department runs. This breaks out based on different types of commercial properties and what the sales ratios are running, the median ratios are running for those types of properties. And again, some of these properties, there's a lot of these types of properties have very few sales in them, which statistically don't really mean too much, but it is an indicator of where the activity is, what types of properties are selling. And like some of the areas that you have most sales, restaurant bars, we had 26 sales. We're running a median 84%. Office buildings, countywide, we're at 93%. There was 36 sales there. Commercial stores, there were 51 sales. we're at 77%. So in those areas where we have quite a few sales, our ratios are looking reasonably acceptable. So that at least says we're in the ballpark. Next page,
I got another question.
Shirley.
Yeah, I just, excuse me, Crosby District 4. So I'm real interested in vehicle sales as a measure of people's consumer confidence. So here we have the 0.673 for auto vehicles. So the way I'm interpreting this 673 number is that means that it's 67% of the selling price
Yes.
of the
The
dealership.
valuation that we have placed on those properties that were dealerships that sold, we were at 67% of that sale. Now, one of the things that we run into until you do a detailed analysis on these, if that dealership involved, what that dealership sale involved, we don't know. So yeah, we're at 67%. And
How many sales?
auto dealers, there were 11 sales.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So it was showing that the average full cash value was 135,000. The average selling price was 209,000. And you think of an auto dealership as being one of the big boys that's here, you know, but in reality, these may be a used car lot or something like that. So, and these are county-wide specs, so it could be something in Pachuca City, it could be something in Benson or Wilcox or Douglas. So when you mix them all together, that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. I believe Lolly sold.
That's what I've heard.
Okay, so what I'm going to be watching is for numbers to change because people are going to go elsewhere because of the sales tax. That's what my concern is. Yeah, thank you, sir.
I believe Southern Arizona Auto and Douglas sold too, didn't it? So the next page is basically as far as on the horizon in the assessor's office, where we're going. Staff development, which I've mentioned, hiring and getting employees certified, getting them trained, getting a good solid appraisal team base is where we're going. Over the last few years, we've had quite a few of our senior people retire, and we're getting them hired. As I mentioned, we have 4 new appraisers that we've hired, and we've got some good people. I think they're going to make good long-term appraisers. Got to get them trained, get them certified. We've got 2 already through training and 1 in level 2, and the other 2 are coming through. We have 1 that's still waiting to get plugged into certification. One of our problems is the department puts on certification training like once a year. So if we hire someone, we miss that cycle, we have to wait a year to get them back in. So that's a real focus on our part. New construction is always number 1 priority in our office as far as making sure all new construction is picked up. That's what builds the assessment base. That's critical to growing the assessment role and getting our values captured out there. That's not always simple because I know it's shocking, but there are places in our county people build without permits, and we have to discover those places. And, it's a constant challenge, but that's a focus that we're on. As far as a lot of the big new construction, that's all permitted, and we're generally on top of that. But you have a lot of additions. You have a lot of real rural things that are being built, and we have to maintain eyes in the field. Aerial imagery we use strongly. That's a huge tool to us. I mean, the reality in the appraisal business of aerial photography is you can't believe that, because we can, I can be on the phone, pull up a parcel, and I can look and see what we're talking about. And before we had this technology, we're talking about pulling up a hard copy drawing And then if we need to know anything else, it's maybe a, 2-hour drive to the property to take a look at it. So the ability to pull up the imagery and to have that access, even if it's 2 or 3-year-old imagery, it's huge compared to not having it. So it's,
How often does it cycle? I mean, you say 2 or 3 years.
well, we use,
It isn't always that old, but
no. And the, depending on what we use, because we use our county version, we use Google Earth a lot. And a lot of the areas that are more urban are updated a lot quicker than the rural stuff. So Google Earth is really good in Sierra Vista and towns because a lot of that stuff may be same year imagery. If you're on a dirt road, forget it with Google Earth. You have to be on pavement for them. And some of their stuff is 2-3 years old. So depends on where you're at as to how good it is. The thing is, it's the rural areas that we need it the most because it's the rural areas where you don't have easy access to. You may have lock gates. You may have topography in the way where you can't see structures from the road. So it's a discovery issue that the aerial imagery doesn't lie, So if you have new construction, you have a building footprint there and we don't have anything picked up, we know we have to jump on it. And then it's a matter of getting access to it, but we know it's there. So that's huge as far as picking up new construction in the rural areas. Land reappraisal is an ongoing process where we were shy land appraisers for a while, but we're getting back up to speed and we're effectively attempting to update area by area. And basically what that means is we have valued parts of the county, the land value. You generally have your land valued and then you have improvements if there's improvements on the land. But the land is driven by the real estate market. And some of the areas you don't have a lot of real estate, a lot of sales to go by. So you have to use the principle of substitution to compare those areas to where you do have sales to make appropriate adjustments to have values where they need to be. But that's a constant, we have 130-some thousand parcels in this county. So to stay on top of having those valued where they need to be is a challenge. You also have a challenge in the rural areas because it all depends whether the property sells, whether it has a well on it, whether it has electricity available to it. The presence of a well and electricity makes a huge difference in the valuation. And if we don't have that information, we have to figure out, if I'm looking at a 40-acre parcel that sold for $80,000, I need to know, did it have a well on it? Does it have electricity or not? Because if it does, that's what it's worth. I mean, if it doesn't, that well and electricity is worth $30,000, $40,000 right there. So we have to, and we're able to use a lot of the information from the Arizona Department of Water Resources to identify wells. And we're using that a lot now, so we can go right on and know if the property has a well on it. If they have a well interest, we have to look at the deed and determine that. But there's a lot of digging there, but it's helping us when we analyze sales affidavits to know what's involved in that sale so we can have an accurate analysis. Without an accurate analysis of a sale, you're guessing, and you can't get good values that way. So the land reappraisal, because it's countywide ongoing, and everything is, you've got a moving target, so it's a challenge. The other thing that we're looking at besides our normal appraisal is this next year we're looking at a mobile home reappraisal possibility on changing our appraisal model for mobile homes, because the current model we're using with the Arizona Department of Revenue is used pretty much statewide, but as we found out with the ag properties, they're not updating their data correctly. And if you realize that a mobile home, say a mobile home 30 years ago, say it was worth $50,000 new. Guess what? That same mobile home today is probably worth $50,000 or $60,000. If the department has a depreciation schedule where it's now valued at being a 30-year-old mobile home at 50% of its value, you have a big problem with that valuation reflecting market value. So we're going to do some work on our end of the fence and get with the Department of Revenue and see where we need to go with this to get these mobile home values more realistic. But I think it's something we have to do because we're falling behind and it's not fair. It's a fairness issue. So the last page is my favorite page. That is what I have. Hopefully that gives the board a little bit of insight about the assessor's office, where we're at right now, what we're doing, and what our challenges are in front of us.
Well, we certainly always have respect for the information that you bring us and feel like it's valid information. One thing for the record, we have some of your staff here, so if you would introduce them or let them introduce themselves so they'd be on the record.
Sure. Vince, why don't you start with yourself, introduce yourself, your position, and go down.
Stagnino, Chief Deputy Assessor.
Lisa Enriquez, assessor, admin assistant. I'm Shannon Romero, tech support admin and office manager.
Thank you. Because sometimes they'll say, well, who all was there, you know, and we sometimes forget to put that in the record. So thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Yes, indeed. If I were to look at this bunch of statutes, where would I most likely want to look for irrigation and acreage? I highlighted everything that said ag right there, and then the subject of production by hydroponics or greenhouses versus something like grazing. Where would I want to?
That's all in one section in Title 42. And if you look at the wherever we're talking about agricultural classification, that there are 4 or 5 statutes right in a row there that covers that.
So if I look at everything on here that says it has the word agriculture.
Yeah,
then I should
exactly,
take it. Okay,
exactly.
sounds good.
That agricultural definition, classification, and valuation is all within right together.
Okay.
So you look at one of those and you can just go right down, and it covers everything from defining what agricultural property is, the different types of agricultural property, what it has to meet the criteria, and it goes into the different issues and the valuation process.
Okay, thank you. Along those lines, I think if it wasn't last year, maybe it was a year before, we were talking about, for instance, big commercial orchards, and I think you just mentioned not updating data. So what was this 50-year? Was that a pretty accurate 50-year plan to raise value of big commercial orchards?
That was done in 2000. What 2 years? 23.
Okay.
2023. We actually did our study and increased all ag values, grazing values, irrigated land values, orchard values, high density values. We increased them all. It hadn't been done. It had been under the direction statutorily of the Department of Revenue to do that, and they had not updated their manuals. And all of the counties were using the department's directions. So we, knowing the values were 40 years old, did that. So that has already gone into effect. We have still pending a major lawsuit with about 13 or 14 growers right now. But that looks real positive right now. That's, in fact, they're doing a hearing, I think, this afternoon or tomorrow on that. But the reality is that we've already done that and increased those values, and we're moving forward. Our ag values are in good shape right now.
Okay, so when you use the phrase "not updating data," that was DOR. That previously was not.
Yes,
updated.
yes. And that's kind of where we're at with the mobile home issue that I brought up. They're charged with establishing accurate depreciation schedules, so we value mobile homes at market value, but they're not really doing that. So we're undervalued on our mobile homes. So that's an issue that I'm looking at this year, which was much like the ag issue in the
So what's that called for cars? What's the,
Appraisal?
no, the book that you go to?
Oh,
buy-
Blue Book.
The blue book.
Well-
So the blue book hasn't been changed for mobile homes.
Well, actually, the statutory methodology, there's two methodologies by statute. The statutory methodology for valuing mobile homes is the manufacturer list price less depreciation.
Mhm.
And the department is supposed to establish that depreciation schedule.
So that's the.
So
problem,
we
the
tie- yeah.
depreciation.
We tie to the list price of the mobile home when it was purchased new, and then it's depreciated from there, like a vehicle. However, vehicles depreciate, but most of these mobile homes are not depreciating much, and they're now reality appreciating based upon what their original purchase price was. And that's the factor that we're not seeing the department taking into consideration. So you can't just have a straight line depreciation schedule on these mobile homes, dropping the values every year, when in fact, they're worth now what they were worth 30 years ago new, and they're working this straight line depreciation schedule, which is they claim they're adjusting to market, but in reality, it's not happening. There's an option of going to a square foot methodology, which we'll look at and valuing mobile homes more on a square foot basis to market and get more realistic that way.
Well, in the beginning, I think they thought they're flimsily made, so they will depreciate quickly.
Yeah.
And-
But you will
and they haven't
see-
changed that.
You will see that if they're maintained, there a lot of them new mobile homes within the last 20, 30 years, they're built pretty good. You can't, I dare say you can't move a regular house down the road at 50 miles an hour and have it hold together like they do. If you've ever worked on one, you realize everything's glued and nailed,
Right.
and but yeah, that's an issue that needs to be addressed, and we're working on it.
Well, thanks for following up. Any questions or comments? Anyone else want to comment? If nothing further, then the next meeting is at 1:30 and.
And is that a vote for 10% increase on the?
You'll notice that there are no actions to be taken today, except that we will change the amount of your salary on the budget.
Okay.
All right, 1:30, work session with the county recorder. Having said that,
142.
1:42, right? Why do you have to bring that up? So it shows that we're long-winded? Okay, I will back up and say, we were supposed to have another meeting at 1:30. It's now 1:42, and so the next meeting will be a little late. But
And I
thank you, Bill,
apologize for holding you over.
well, we had a lot of questions.
That's right.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.